The furnace repairman showed up at 8 in the morning, the way they always do. Right when you're still on your first cup of coffee and your hair isn't combed and you've got that look on your face that says you're not ready for anyone to be in your house yet. I let him in, pointed him toward the basement stairs, and went back to the kitchen. His name was Al. I know because he had it stitched on his jacket in red thread, the old-fashioned way. He was maybe 35, heavy-set, moved like a man who'd been going down basement stairs his whole career. I offered him coffee. He said no thanks, just water, and I filled a glass and left it on the top step for him. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. My fiancée, I'll call her by what she was to me then, my fiancée, had scheduled the repair appointment 2 weeks earlier. I'd taken the day off work because she asked me to, said she didn't feel comfortable letting a stranger into the house alone. I thought that was reasonable. I thought it was the kind of thing couples do for each other. I was 54 years old, and I had been alone for 6 years since my wife passed, and I was still learning what it meant to be part of something again. Her name was Vivienne. She was 41. A real estate agent, sharp dresser, the kind of woman who remembered every detail you ever told her and brought it back up at the right moment in a way that made you feel genuinely seen. We'd met at a grief support group of all places. She'd lost her mother. I'd lost my wife. We sat in the same circle for 3 months before I asked her to dinner. I want to say that again clearly because I think it matters. I met her at a grief support group. By the time the furnace repairman was in my basement, Vivienne and I had been together for 14 months. We were engaged for 2 of those. The ring had cost me more than I want to put in writing, not because I couldn't afford it. I could. My father had left me a property in Vermont, and I'd sold it the year before, so I had money sitting in accounts I hadn't had before. But because spending that kind of money on a ring felt like something I was doing for the first time in my life, and I wanted it to mean something. I was upstairs making a second cup of coffee when Al came up from the basement. He didn't say anything right away. He stood at the top of the stairs with his clipboard, and he looked at me, and then he looked at the floor, and then he looked at me again. "Everything okay down there?" I asked. "Furnace is fine," he said. "Minor blockage, nothing serious. I cleared it." "Good, that's good." He didn't move toward the door. He set his clipboard on the counter without asking, and he crossed his arms and he said, "Can I ask you something that isn't about the furnace?" I put down my coffee cup. "Your house," he said. "You own it?" "Yes." "How long?" 11 years. "Why?" He exhaled through his nose. He looked like a man trying to decide whether to get involved in something he wasn't asked to get involved in. "I used to do side work," he said. "House flipping, mostly foreclosures, sometimes estates. I spent a lot of time in county records." "Okay. Your address," he said. "I recognized it when I pulled the work order this morning. Before I came over, I looked it up. Just habit." He paused. "There's a title search filed against this property. Recent. Filed about 6 weeks ago." I stared at him. "I don't know the situation," he said. "Could be nothing. Could be a mistake. But somebody is doing research on who owns this house and what the mortgage looks like." He slid his clipboard toward me and pointed at an address he'd written down. "That's the county assessor's office. You can go in person or look online. I thought you should know." I didn't say anything for a moment. "It might be nothing," he said again. "Who filed it?" He hesitated. The name on the inquiry was a law firm, Hargrove & Associates. I had never heard of Hargrove & Associates. He gave me a card for the HVAC company, shook my hand, and left. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The coffee got cold. The house was quiet, the way houses are when something has shifted inside them that you can't quite name yet. I want to tell you who I am before I go further, because I think it explains why I didn't call Vivienne immediately and ask her directly. I am not a suspicious man by nature. I spent 22 years in insurance adjustments. Not the most romantic work, but it's work that teaches you to look for facts before conclusions. My late wife used to say I was constitutionally incapable of jumping to conclusions, that I would sooner build a bridge to a conclusion, brick by brick over 10 years than leap. She said it like a flaw. I took it as a compliment. So I didn't call Vivienne. I went to the county assessor's website. The title inquiry was there, filed 6 weeks earlier, from a firm called Hargrove & Associates. I searched the firm. They were out of Portland, Oregon. They did estate litigation and property disputes. I searched their client list. You can't find that publicly, of course. But I found a press release from 3 years earlier about a case they'd won involving a woman named Claudette Marsh, who had disputed her ex-husband's claim to a vacation property in coastal Maine. I searched Claudette Marsh. It took me about 10 minutes. Her second marriage, her divorce settlement, her name before she was Marsh. Her name before she was Marsh was Vivian Alcott. My fiance's name before she took her first husband's last name was Vivian Alcott. I sat with that for a while. I am not a man who cries easily. I cried after my wife died, in the car mostly, never at home where my son could see it. I cried once when my father died, standing in the kitchen at 3 in the morning while my family slept, with a glass of water in my hand that I kept forgetting to drink. I don't say this to seem tough. I say it because what I felt sitting at my kitchen table that afternoon wasn't tears. It was something closer to the feeling you get when you're driving in fog and you slow down and then suddenly you realize the road has been curving for the last half mile and you didn't notice, and now you're not where you thought you were. Vivienne had told me she'd been married before. She said it ended badly. She said her ex-husband had been controlling with money that she'd had to fight to keep anything she'd earned, that the whole experience had soured her on financial conversations for years. She said it vulnerably, the way you tell someone a hard truth when you trust them. I had believed her completely. Her ex-husband's name, she had told me, was Keith. I called my son that evening. He's 31, lives in Denver, works in tech. He's practical. The way young people who grew up with the internet are practical. He can find things online faster than I can think of questions to ask. I told him what the repairman had said. I told him what I'd found. I didn't tell him how I felt about it because I wasn't sure yet. Don't say anything to her yet, he said immediately. Don't change your behavior. Let me look into this. I'm not going to lie to her. You're not lying. You're not saying anything. There's a difference. I spent that evening at the kitchen table while Vivienne made pasta and talked about a listing she'd shown that afternoon. A Victorian in the historic district, original hardwood, copper gutters. The owners had no idea what they had. She was animated the way she always was when she talked about houses. She touched my arm twice during dinner. She asked me if I was tired. Long day, I said. She said, the furnace guy, did he fix it? Yes, I said, minor blockage. She nodded and went back to her pasta. My son called me 3 days later. Vivian's ex-husband was not named Keith. His name was Douglas Marsh. I recognized that name from the county records, and their divorce had been finalized 4 years ago. The settlement had been contentious. A vacation property in Maine had been the central dispute. According to what my son found in court records, Vivienne had been awarded nothing because her ex-husband had placed the property in a revocable trust before the marriage, and the judge ruled it non-marital property. She had spent 2 years fighting that ruling. She had lost. The firm she'd hired for that fight was Hargrove and Associates, the same firm now filing a title inquiry on my house. My son was quiet for a moment on the phone. Then he said, Dad, she brought her divorce lawyer to look into your property. I said I knew. He said, before you were even engaged? I said, 6 weeks ago was before the engagement. We got engaged 8 weeks ago. Neither of us said anything for a while. She was researching your assets, he said, before she said yes. I had paid for the ring. I had proposed on the back porch in October, under the string lights I'd put up for her because she'd mentioned once, 3 months earlier, that she'd always wanted a porch with string lights. I had been so proud of myself for remembering that detail. I had been so careful to make her feel seen. I called a lawyer that week, not Hargrove and Associates, obviously. I called a man named Griswold who had handled my wife's estate and who I trusted entirely. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is what good lawyers do. The Vermont property sale, he said when I was done. How much are we talking? I told him. He was quiet for a moment. Is that money in a joint account? No. Separate. I haven't touched it since I put it there. Keep it there. Don't move it. Don't mention it. Don't open any joint accounts. He paused. Do you own this house outright or is there a mortgage? I have a mortgage. 12 years left. Who's on the title? Only me. Good. Keep it that way. Do not put her name on anything. I asked him whether, if we married, she would have a claim to the sale proceeds from Vermont. He said in this state, inheritance and gift money brought into a marriage typically remain separate property. As long as I hadn't commingled it, as long as I hadn't mixed it with shared money, spent it on joint things, or documented it in ways that blurred the line. Had she asked about the Vermont money, he said? I thought about that. She had. 3 times, actually. Each time casual. Each time folded into normal conversation. How much had it sold for? What had I done with it? Had I thought about reinvesting it? Each time I'd been somewhat vague, the way private people are, and each time she'd accepted the vagueness without pushing, except for the night, about 2 months ago, when she'd suggested we see a financial advisor together. She had even named one. She'd said a friend had recommended him. I had said maybe, and then I had forgotten about it. She named a specific advisor, Griswold said. Yes. Find out if that advisor has any connection to Hargrove and Associates. It took me 2 days. The financial advisor Vivienne had named had left a previous firm under circumstances I couldn't fully determine. But his previous firm had been listed as an expert witness in 2 of Hargrove's cases. They were not strangers to each other. I sat with that for a long time, too. I need to tell you about a conversation we had, Vivienne and I, maybe a month after we started dating. We were walking along the waterfront, early evening, the kind of October night that feels like a gift because you know it's the last one before the cold comes and stays. She had asked me about my father, and I had told her about Vermont, about the summers I spent there as a kid, about what it meant to sell that land after he died. I told her I'd felt like I was selling something that didn't quite belong to me, even though legally it did, that the money from it felt different from money I'd earned myself. Like it was held in trust, not legally, but in some private way, the way grief holds things. She had stopped walking and looked at me and said, "That's exactly it. That's exactly how I'd describe it." I had believed she understood. I have thought about that moment many times since. Whether she was genuinely moved or whether she was cataloging, whether the woman walking next to me that night was listening because she cared about who I was or because she was building a file, I still don't know. I may never know. And I think that uncertainty is the part that takes the longest to get over. I planned carefully. Griswold advised me not to act suddenly or emotionally, not because I owed Vivienne anything at that point, but because careful is always better than fast when property is involved. So I spent 3 weeks moving quietly. I documented everything: the title inquiry, the connection between Hargrove and the financial advisor, the timeline of Vivienne's questions about my finances. I sent all of it to Griswold. I updated the beneficiary designations on my accounts. I had a private conversation with my bank. I did not let my behavior change around Vivienne. I cooked dinner. I watched football on Sunday. I fixed the gutter on the east side of the house that had been pulling loose since September. I let her talk about the Victorian with the copper gutters and the hardwood floors. I let her ask me once more about the financial advisor. And this time I said I'd been thinking about it, and I didn't think I was ready for joint financial planning yet, that I was still getting comfortable, and she nodded and said she understood completely. I watched her face when she said it. I don't know what I was looking for. I think I was looking for a flicker of something. Impatience, calculation, the mask slipping. But her face was open and warm, and she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and I thought about how good she was at this, and how little that mattered now. I ended the engagement on a Sunday afternoon. I had asked her to sit down. I had put her coffee on the table. I told her I knew about Hargrove and Associates. I told her I knew her ex-husband's name was Douglas, not Keith. I told her I knew about the main property, about the court case, about the financial advisor. She didn't deny any of it immediately, which told me something. A person caught in a complete misunderstanding will deny it immediately. She sat very still for a moment, the way a person sits when they're deciding which version of the truth to offer. Then she said that she had only been trying to protect herself, that her first marriage had left her with nothing, that she had gone into it trusting completely and come out of it with nothing to show for 14 years, and that she had promised herself she would never let that happen again. She said she hadn't meant any harm by it. She said she hadn't meant any harm by it. She said she had real feelings for me. She said the financial research was just precaution, background, something she did quietly, in parallel, the way anyone would before making a major commitment. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. Then I asked her about the grief support group. She looked at me differently then, just for a second. Something moved across her face that I can't fully describe. Not guilt exactly, more like the particular discomfort of being seen somewhere you didn't expect to be seen. I asked her whether her mother had actually died. She said yes, her mother had died. That was real. I believe her. I think I believe her. But I also know that a grief support group is a room full of people who are vulnerable and open in a way that people usually aren't. And I know what I was like in that room, and I know she saw it, and I can't unknow those things anymore. I asked her to leave. She left the ring on the kitchen counter. She picked it up once, looked at it, set it back down. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped I knew that some of it had been real. I told her I believed her. After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The ring was still on the counter. The house was quiet. My son flew out the following weekend. He didn't ask me how I was doing because he knows me, and he knows asking that directly just makes me talk around it. Instead, he showed up with a cooler of steaks and 2 six-packs, and asked me if I'd changed the locks yet. I said not yet. He said, let's do it now, and we spent 2 hours in the cold swapping out every lock in the house, him on the screwdriver, me holding the flashlight, neither of us saying much. That night after dinner he asked me if I was okay, and I said I would be. She was good, he said. Not meanly. Almost like he was being fair. She was very good, I said. He shook his head. And the repairman. Al. Yeah. You gave him a good tip? I smiled. I left a review online. Said he went above and beyond. My son nodded and cracked another beer. Someone's going to read that someday and wonder what the hell you meant. I said, let them wonder. My wife's name was Joanna. She died of pancreatic cancer 6 years ago. 3 months after the diagnosis, fast and unfair the way it always is. She was 51. We had been married 27 years. She was the person who knew where everything was, the insurance papers, the warranty for the dishwasher, the birthday card she bought 6 months early and labeled with names and stacked in the hallway closet. After she died, I spent 4 months not knowing where anything was. I went to the grief support group because my doctor suggested it, and because I was having trouble sleeping. I was not there to meet anyone. That was true. What I know now, what that Sunday afternoon in the kitchen clarified for me, is that I had still been in that room in some essential way, even 14 months after I first walked through its door. I had still been the man who didn't know where anything was, open in a way I wouldn't have been otherwise. I don't say that to excuse anything or to explain it away. I say it because it's true, and because the thing I've spent the most time working through isn't the money or the legal history or even the lie about her ex-husband's name. The thing I've spent the most time working through is sitting with the fact that I had been seen very clearly, and that being clearly seen by someone does not mean they are on your side. I'm not sure I knew that before. I think I thought those things were the same. The Vermont money is still in its account, untouched. My house has one name on the title. The locks are new. I still drive past the waterfront sometimes in October, when the light is that particular low gold that makes everything look a little more meaningful than it probably is. I think about that walk. About what I said about the money from the land feeling like it was held in trust. I think about how she said that's exactly it. Maybe she meant it. Maybe that moment was real. And the rest was complicated, and people are not one thing or another, but some unresolvable mixture of genuine and calculated. And you can't separate it out cleanly even if you try. I've stopped trying to separate it out. What I know is this. I am 54 years old. I've buried my father and my wife. I've raised a son who drives in on a weekend and puts his back into changing locks without needing to be asked. I have a house I own. I have money my father worked his whole life to pass down to me, sitting in an account with only my name on it. I walk through this house sometimes at night when I can't sleep, the way you do when a place is yours and you know it. When every creak in the floor is familiar and the dark doesn't feel threatening. I make coffee. I sit at the kitchen table where so many things have been decided. I'm not done. I know that. I'm not done, and I know where everything is. I've thought a lot about what Al did that morning. He didn't have to say a word. He fixed the furnace. He got paid. He could have walked out the door and gone on to the next job, and that would have been the end of it. Nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have even known. But he stood at the top of those basement stairs, and he made a choice that cost him nothing except a few minutes of potential awkwardness, and that choice changed the entire direction of my life. I think about that whenever I hear people talk about minding your own business like it's a virtue. Sometimes minding your own business is just a polished way of saying you saw something wrong and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. What Vivian did wasn't a crime. I want to be honest about that. She researched my assets. She built a strategy. She was careful and patient and thorough. None of that is illegal. What it was a decision, a long series of deliberate decisions to treat another person as a problem to be solved rather than a life to be part of. And decisions like that have a way of compounding. You start with one small calculation and then you build a whole architecture around it, and eventually the architecture is all there is. She had spent so much energy constructing something that she may have forgotten, somewhere along the way, what she originally wanted to build. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it's true, and because understanding it is the only thing that's actually helped me move forward. The part that took me the longest to sit with was my own role in it. I had been open in a way that made me easy to read. I had been generous with information, the way grieving people often are, the way people who have been lonely for a long time tend to be, because sharing yourself with someone after years of silence feels like recovery. I had mistaken being known for being safe, and that mistake was mine. Not hers, mine. Recognizing that isn't self-blame. It's just accuracy. You can't build better judgment without being honest about where the old judgment fell short. What I know now, that I didn't fully know before, is that real attention is not the same as real care. Someone can study you closely, remember every detail, reflect your own language back to you, and still be entirely elsewhere. Intelligence and integrity are not the same thing. A person can be very smart about people and still treat them badly. And the fact that someone sees you clearly does not mean they are on your side. My son came out and changed the locks with me. That matters. He didn't make a speech about it, didn't turn it into a lesson, just showed up with a screwdriver in his own 2 hands and worked beside me in the cold until the job was done. That's the kind of thing you only get from someone who was never calculating in the first place. That's what genuine looks like. It's quieter than I expected. It doesn't announce itself. I still have the house. I still have the money my father left me, sitting where it belongs, with my name on it. I still walk through these rooms at night sometimes when I can't sleep, and the dark is familiar and the floor creaks in the same places it always has. I am not the man who didn't know where anything was anymore. I'm not done. I said that at the end, and I meant it. There's still a lot of life on the other side of this,